Okay, we're going to try this again. The Development Review Commission is created to hold public meetings and hearings to provide analysis and recommendations to the City Council regarding general land use policies and applications, where the Commission has the power to recommend and to render final decisions on specified applications, where the Commission has final decision-making power, including but not limited to all aspects of proposed and future development. The Development Review Commission recognizes that the creation of a desirable environment throughout the city for residents, business, and industry is a prime requisite for the interdependence of land values, aesthetics, and good site planning by promoting harmonious, safe, attractive, and compatible development that's therefore considered to be in the best interests of public health, safety, and general welfare. I'd like to start by introducing the members of the commission. To my far left is Andrew Johnson, Phil Amorosi, Scott Sumners. To my right is Vice Chair David Lyon, Mike DiDomenico, Tom Brown, and I'm Chair Linda Spears. From staff, we have Cynthia Jarrett, Karen Stovall, Obinia Kingsley, Suparna Das Gupta, and Diana Kaminsky. I'd like to begin with the meeting minutes from the March 27th regular session and study session. Vice Chair Lyon.
Madam Chair, I move that we approve the study session and regular session minutes for March 27th.
And moved by Vice Chair Lyon and seconded by Commissioner DiDomenico. All those in favor? And that passes 6-0 with the members in attendance voting. The next item, we're actually going to change the order. So we're going to hear case 5 first, which is the collective. Staff.
All right. Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Karen Stovall, Senior Planner. And these requests are for the property at the southwest corner of Myrtle and 7th Street, just east of Mill Avenue and north of University. The site is currently vacant and is zoned CCPAD-TOD. The property comprises the easternmost lot of the previously approved M7 PAD, which was approved by Council in 2008. The lots comprising the center portion of the M7 PAD were part of the Weston Tempe amended PAD that was approved by Council in November 2017. And this slide shows the proposed development on the east end in relation to the footprint of the proposed Weston Hotel. The application before you today includes 3 requests: an amended planned area development for the 0.4 acre site, a use permit to allow 38 tandem parking spaces within the garage, and a development plan review for a new 21-story building with 269 units and 6,000 square feet of commercial space on the ground floor. The proposed density is 672 dwelling units per acre, and the maximum building height allowed by the PAD would be 245 feet. The plans show a driveway off of Myrtle that leads to an above-grade 4-level parking garage, and a garage entrance from the alley that leads to 1 below-grade level, 9 on-street parking spaces for a total of 164 vehicle parking spaces for the project. Within the garage, there are 38 tandem spaces, providing between 4 and 5 of these double-loaded stalls per floor of the garage. Residential amenity decks are provided on the 5th floor and above the 21st floor on the rooftop. These are the building elevations showing concrete and storefront windows at the 1st floor. Steel canopies project into the right-of-way for a distance of 8 feet to shade the sidewalks along both street frontages. The parking garage incorporates perforated metal, let me get to that one, metal panels, EIFS, and integral colored CMU. Residential units between the 5th and the 21st floor are finished with EIFS and metal screening, and the balcony patios are enclosed with aluminum railing with glass panels. The rooftop deck is also surrounded by the same glass panels. Staff is recommending approval of the use permit for tandem parking and approval of the DPR requests. However, we are recommending denial of the proposed PAD. The applicant is proposing alternative parking ratios of 0.57 spaces per dwelling unit that would require 155 vehicle parking spaces, where the zoning ordinance requires 215. This is a shortage of 60 spaces. Such a reduction in parking could limit the type of residents interested in renting the units, could prevent the development from being converted into owner-occupied housing in the future, and could have a negative impact on the availability of parking in the immediate neighborhood. If the commission recommends approval of the PAD to council, staff has included conditions to address that parking deficiency. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of staff? Commissioner DiDomenico.
Yeah, please point out those conditions that would address the parking deficiency.
So on page 8 of the staff report, it is the first PAD condition of approval that the development comply with the city center parking standards by any of those options. So options A through D. So they include a reduction in the number of dwelling units or bedrooms, addition of below-grade parking, addition of above-grade parking, which, in speaking with the applicant, would increase the levels of building by at least 2 for 2 additional parking floors, or off-site parking with the recordation of an affidavit.
Yep. Thank you.
Amorosi, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Does staff have a number? So like there's 60 parking spaces short. Would you say 30 parking spaces might be okay, or?
So our recommendation is that the applicant should comply with the code. So it would be 215 spaces.
Okay.
Other questions of staff? If not, if the applicant would like to address the commission?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. For your record, my name is Manjula Vaz, law firm Gamage and Burnham. Address is 2 North Central, Phoenix, 85004. I'm here tonight on behalf of the collective of 7th and Myrtle. The site, I'm going to take you through this really quickly, and Chad's going to come back. The site, as you know, is at the corner of 7th Street and Myrtle. This was part of a longer block that expanded from Mill to Myrtle, and you have kind of 2 bookends, and the west end is in the middle. So right today we are bringing forward the project, I want to do this a little differently, the project that's on the Myrtle side. In the future, you will see the project that is on the Mill side. The project that we're bringing forward today was initially entitled to be a residential building that was approximately 306 feet in height. This project today is shorter in height and has less units. But as we've kind of talked to the council, the council wanted everybody to try to put back the original intent of the master plan, which is with residential and hotels. So that's kind of the intent we're bringing forward today. So with that, and I'll go through the zoning in a minute, I want to have Chad talk to you a little bit about Core Spaces and the other projects they've built, and then we'll have Jeff talk about the architecture. You're going to have a lot of people back and forth today. We're going to talk about the architecture, and then lastly, we're going to talk about our parking. But here you go, Chad.
Hello, my name is Chad Natasi. I'm Executive Vice President of Development at Core Spaces. Core and its principals have been developing mixed-use developments around the nation for over 10 years now. Core began effectively as a student housing developer. Some of you may know us from a prior project here in town. But over the years, Core has been diversifying our portfolio and effectively growing our student housing platform into what we're here to talk about today, which is known as our Collective brand. The Collective brand is focused on market rate housing, hospitality, and office, with an emphasis on capturing the professional market, the young professional market in educational markets across the nation. Today, we have successfully delivered the first of this product that you see up here on the board, named the James in Madison, Wisconsin. We are currently under construction on the Collective in Portland, Oregon, which is a full city block downtown Portland. And we are working with the city of Ann Arbor in Michigan on the Collective in Ann Arbor, which is currently in entitlements. So from there, I'll turn it over to Jeff and Modular.
Yes, I just want Chad to explain what the Collective has done. Just briefly, I'm going to go through the, I think you all know the site. What this is intended to show, there used to be some abandoned, Andy, Commissioner Johnson can certainly attest to this, there used to be some, there was an old apartment building here that has recently been demolished. We had some issues related to both a little bit of trespassing and some fires, so that building has come down. This is the current look of the site. It's vacant. You can see the Opus building to the immediate east being built to that. This is, and I know you know this well, and it's probably too small to see, but kind of generally the height distribution in downtown Tempe. At 245 to the top and 225 to the building height, it's approximately the height of the taller of the Opus buildings. I think the Westin that's adjacent to it is about 220 in height and approximately 230 to the top of its penthouse. Warner, Obi, or somebody can correct me, but it's approximately that. Again, as Karen said, the project today is to establish a PAD, to establish site-specific development standards. We have a design approval, and then use permit for the tandem parking. As you know, we meet the, we conform with the general plan, and we conform with the general plan density, mixed use, and then residential density greater than 65 dwelling units to the acre. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, who's our architect from Antonovich and Associates. He's going to walk you through the project, walk you through the design, and then we can talk a little bit about parking, and then we're happy to answer any questions.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Salisco. I'm a senior principal with Antonovich Associates. We're architects working with Core Spaces. We have offices in Chicago and DC. I believe they brought us on because of the expertise we have with multifamily, market rate mixed-use developments. Over the last 2 years, we've opened almost 20 of these projects, 2 of which actually were in the Phoenix area. And it's very much a specialty of what we do, making these special places for people to live. So definitely an expertise, and I think that's why we're here. So I wanted to jump into the numbers and walk through the design, the planning, the streetscape, kind of the concept behind the design, and then from there we're going to pass it on to Andrew and Chuck to talk a bit about the parking. So you've heard some of this before, but I think it may be good just to run through it again. We have 269 units in this development. 18 are micro studio units, 54 studio units, 34 one-bedroom units, 131 two-bedroom units, and 32.
Let me interrupt you a second. What's the square footage on a micro?
It's approximately 400 square feet, and 32 three-bedroom units. We have approximately 6,000 square feet of retail, which opens onto 7th Street, really excellent retail depth. The lobby is about 3,300 square feet. We have over 4,000, almost 4,700 square feet, 4,400 square feet of amenity area on the 5th floor, which we'll talk about a little bit more. Again, 160 parking spaces, 5 of which are tandem spaces, 29 moped spaces, and 336 bike parking spaces that are located through the different parking floors. There are 9 spaces along Myrtle and along 7th, 9 street parking spaces. And then there was also, which I'll show you a little bit later, some wonderful outdoor seating along 7th Street. So with that, I'm going to move along. And then we have 2 terrace levels I want to point out, and we'll see it later. Again, on the 5th floor and on the rooftop of the building where there is also a pool. So first floor, and I'm going to point a little bit behind you. I know you're looking at your screens, but we have retail again along 7th Street. So 6,000 square feet, very good depths for, many uses for that. The lobby is along Myrtle on this location. And there's wonderful dense plant materials. We have passion trees and orchid trees, along both streets. And we have an 8-foot deep trellis, and we'll see a little bit more in the renderings, but it really creates almost like an outdoor room, protection from the sun, something that creates really a great feel for the retail along those streets. And the sidewalks are 8 feet, the planter depths are at least 10 feet, so it's going to be really lush landscaping that creates this space as you move around the building on the street. Showing more of that, the same along the ground floor level. Oops. My heart just jumped when that went off. So we then have, we saw earlier, there's a one lower level of parking, and then there's 4 parking levels. Then the 5th floor is this amenity level. So there's 13 residential units on that floor, and then this 4,400 square feet of exercise facilities and amenity space. In addition to that, we've set back this floor plate, and it really helps create the base of the building. And we have lush landscaping that surrounds the building, facing towards the hotel to the west, and then towards 7th Street to the north, and then towards Myrtle to the east. And that's not accessible space, but it's landscape space that you'll see from those units. And also, this landscaping that we'll provide there will kind of trickle over the side. So it really creates a lush element at that portion of the building. We think that's very important. In addition, there's a courtyard space on this level. There's terraces in 4 of the units. And then there's what we consider a quiet courtyard space. And what we do a lot, and what we hear a lot and talk about a lot with these outdoor spaces, we create many small spaces. It's spaces for people. It's kind of a little bit of a motto that people can be alone together. So they have their spot, they're with friends or by themselves, but there's lots of little spaces and nooks and crannies for people to be able to sit and relax in these common areas. We find it's really a big part of luxury market rate developments, buildings that we do. The units, there's a mix, as we talked about a little bit earlier. We make extremely efficient units. If you look at our 3-bedroom and 2-bedroom units, there's zero circulation space, so they're extremely efficient units, and it's something that we've really honed and I think created almost an art form with CORE in developing these plans, and they're extremely efficient units. We also have these wonderful micro units which have actually a folding bed that folds into a couch. So again, really work this to an art form, creating really efficient space in that unit as an example, but really all of them in that way. We have large closets in these units, generous bedrooms, and great living spaces. And the other thing I want to point out with these units, we have 9-foot high ceilings, but we also have floor-to-ceiling glass, really large glass areas in the bedrooms and in the living spaces. So they have a really wonderful open feeling. It's all part of the entire kind of holistic part of the design for the units. Looking now at the roof garden, there's on the roof terrace, so this is on the 22nd floor, there's a trellis element that sits along the Myrtle side. And there's really 2 elements here. There's one that surrounds the pool, which is a wonderful pool area with a hot tub. There's day beds, really elegant spaces surrounding that pool. And then separate from that, there's, lots of outdoor spaces, again, for people to be able to be alone together with their friends, but really 2 separate spaces on that roof. All of these, the space is separated with a landscape buffer around the perimeter, and we do have a high glass element that surrounds that building. So they're very safe spaces. Again, a lot of great outdoor space for people to be able to take advantage of, again, alone together. I keep saying that, I know people seem to like that. So I want to talk about the design. This is really looking across from Myrtle and 7th. And this building, we really kind of took a cue from Louis Sullivan. The building has a powerful base, has a strong upper element or shaft element, and then it's crowned off by a really strong, powerful top to the building. And when you look at it from a distance, that's what we think is important. We've created this balcony element that wraps up and over with a trellis, creates really a powerful element that you see from the distance. But even more important, I think, is the streetscape, and we'll see some more images with that, but we have wonderful glassy streetscape that look out onto these landscape areas with generous sidewalks. And then above that, I think often what happens to these buildings, we have 4 parking levels above, that becomes something of an afterthought. We didn't do that at all. It's a powerful element with corrugated metal siding. those perforated panels, so there's some vision into those garage spaces, and you'll see the lights move around a little bit, but there are walls around the perimeter, so the light won't shine out onto the street. We think it's extremely powerful element and creates a real counterpoint to the other elements in the building. You also see in this at that 5th floor where we have a setback with those green spaces that will have the landscaping element cascading over the side. We think that'll be very powerful also. So those are all important elements that it's really what you're feeling when you're at the street walking around the building are those floors that really are just above it. Then above, we're using what we're calling a stow panel system. This allows us to have an articulated surface on these elements, and they're vertical, and they reinforce the vertical elements. So these have this articulated shape. These panels are built in the factory, so they have shop conditions. They're of very high quality and then installed in place. So it's a form of an exterior insulation finish system, but it's really the next level of that type of a product, an entirely different quality from products that are installed on site. So we think it gives us a lot of flexibility. It allows us, what we've also done is we want the building to have a consistent feeling around, but at the same time, there's little things that happen on different sides. So we have a couple of colors as the building rises up, but those colors kind of, we feel like they complement each other, and they give a little bit of a different feeling as you do see the building from different sides. Yet it's happening within a framework of similar windows and similar vertical elements. Another view, this is looking towards Myrtle. Again, a very powerful element with that balcony. You see consistent elements, but they kind of act a little bit different on each of the elevations. And they're a nice counterpoint towards what will be the darker elements around the windows and the perforated panels at the parking garage, kind of a gunmetal gray element, so a great contrast to these other elements. Not too dark, just kind of a color that creates a great contrast. Now this is actually looking towards the north along Myrtle. This is showing we're planning an art element, artistic element along the back of the building. We think that we want every element to be an important part of the design of the building. So that mural we feel is an important part of what happens back there. You know, it's a little bit of a surprise when you see the building from every direction. This gives a little bit of context with the buildings, so the massings of the buildings next to us. It's consistent in height to what's around it. The one difference with this building, it is a relatively small floor plate, so it has a different character to it than the other buildings, which are far, far bigger footprints. I was talking a lot about the street, so we kind of half-tone the trees, but there's a very strong line of trees along Myrtle and along 7th. And again, with that trellis element, it creates what I, again, call an outdoor room space, you know, surrounded on one side by wonderful retailers, on the other side by lush landscaping. There's these wonderful little seating areas along 7th, which really aren't, those are for anybody to use. They're part of the public domain, and really, again, important elements as part of that streetscape and how it all interacts and works. As we're looking at this, again, just wanted to point out the power, you know, with what we're doing with the space. We think that it's has a lot of character to it, and it's really a complement to what happens at the base of the building. A little closer look, then you're seeing that the outdoor seating. As we look at these retailers, we're showing a type of a nano system. Depending on the retailer, that would be absolutely a possibility with what we're proposing. And again, that opens the inside to the outside with the retail. Assume that, you know, think of that as a great restaurant with that sort of element there. So definitely a possibility. This is a look, so this is the hotel, and then this is looking up towards Myrtle along 7th. We've chamfered our corner to provide visibility angles from their garage. Again, you see that powerful trellis element with the landscape elements that also take place along the street. This is looking now at Myrtle, at the lobby for the collective, and then up towards the retail. Again, that trellis element carries along Myrtle. That's a very powerful element on the street. And then back from the rear, this is showing access up to the parking, the alley where there's parking access that goes up, or I'm sorry, that access goes down. This wraps up to those higher levels, and then our mural element that we're considering. This view shows, again, that real break from the base of the building up to the tower element. And I think with that, I'm going to pass on to Andrew. I think we can take questions maybe after we get done with everyone talking.
Good evening. I'm Andrew Wiedner. I'm the Chief Investment Officer with Core Spaces. I know one of the big topics has been parking with this development. So I thought what I would do is share some of our experience in developing urban infill high-rise developments like this. Core, as a company, as Chad mentioned, started in 2009, but the principals of our company have been involved in developing these urban infill locations really since 1999. It's been a not to use a pun, but a core focus of ours has been, you know, walkability and proximity. We feel that those two factors, walkability and proximity to both work and play, really enhance the quality of life of people in general, and it's been something that our residents have really enjoyed across the country. You know, community benefits that we've seen from reduced parking include increased increased usage of public transit, and you have a tremendous light rail system here that I think just going into the future is only going to improve the viability of Tempe and will continue to make that. It'll become even more prevalent here. Obvious benefits are reduced traffic and pollution, improved road safety, and then one thing that I think is really been a big push behind the what we're calling car cutting is the reduced cost of living. The AAA estimates that the average car ownership in the United States costs $700 a month. When you translate that to factoring that into your living decision, those are some real savings there. When you're in locations like this that have such a strong presence of workforce, nightlife, entertainment, where you really don't need to have a car in a location like this. We've seen this trend over time has only become more and more prevalent with the reduced reliance on a car. I think in terms of industry talk, the biggest technology disruptor for the multifamily industry has quite honestly been Uber and Zipcar and Lyft and all the car sharing options that are now available that didn't really exist or definitely weren't very prevalent 5 years ago. You think when we're developing this project and delivering it in 2.5, 3 years from now, it's only going to continue to become more prevalent. Some interesting statistics. 61% of Zipcar's users, over 1 million users, have actually abandoned their car after signing up for Zipcar. A much smaller study, but here in Tempe we did a survey walking the streets and we interviewed 100 people, young professionals. We targeted young professionals in the market and asked them if a car sharing service like Zipcar was available in the building, would you consider making that your primary mode of transportation? 58 of those 100, almost exactly in line with the Zipcar statistics, said that yes, they would make that their primary mode of transportation. We've seen there's a number of statistics that we had cited in the parking memo. Another one was that in the demographic from 18 to 34, from 2010 to 2015, new car ownership declined 30%. New car purchases declined 30% within that demographic. It's happening across the country. It's happening especially in urban locations like this, where you have proximity to all these wonderful things. Additional studies that we cited, Federal Highway Administration, National Center for Transit Research, all talked about how parking has been oversupplied, and if it continues to be oversupplied, it's only going to increase problems with traffic, road safety, and in situations like this where you are proximate to transit, proximate to jobs, nightlife, retail, we don't need nearly as many cars as we have been providing in a lot of these developments. When we talk about Tempe and what we like about this location, we estimated that within a 20-mile walk of our property that there are 25,000 jobs, and we're just looking to capture just a small percentage of that. There's a vibrant downtown community that our residents will benefit from. We're less than a 10-minute walk to the light rail, and something that doesn't exist in many of at least not to this prevalence, is the biking culture here. I know Tempe was the League of American Bicyclists had given Tempe a gold standard certification for biking. Our location has a bike score of 98 out of 100. That's something that we don't see in many of the communities that we're developing in. By comparison, Chad had mentioned the Madison and Portland locations. Our parking ratios there were both right around 37% per unit. By comparison, here we're providing 56%, which we feel like we're providing more parking than we actually need with this current proposal. We've also, through another kind of you call it a sister company of CORE's, we've developed projects in Chicago at 25%, parking spaces per unit. Actually, one of them was next to a building with 99 units and 0 parking in the building. I think if you look at the chart that's posted on the screen here, we're providing 164 parking spaces for cars. We're providing additional moped spaces because we've seen that become more of a rising trend in a lot of urban locations. And then also we're providing car share. So the 65, we're providing five cars for the car sharing service. The 65 is actually a conservative estimate. Zipcar estimates that for every car that you provide, that provides a vehicle for an average of 13 people that don't own a car. When you add that up, we're providing parking at a much higher ratio, 91% parking per unit when you factor in the car sharing. On top of that, because we do believe that the demand for biking will be very strong here, we're providing bike parking for 25% in excess of the what I know is already in this district. I apologize, I can't remember the name. But I know in our district there's an increased bike requirement, and we're actually going 25% above and beyond that requirement. I think our interests are aligned. We don't want to provide less parking than we feel would be required for us to market our building. That would be a detriment to us if we were short parking, but we believe very strongly in this model and this product, and think it'll be very successful here. Thank you.
Could we kind of speed this up a little bit, please?
We are going to speed up. One more second. Don here. I just brought Don up here, and then we'll be done, to talk about the ITE standards. This is mainly about parking, just in terms of, where the future of parking goes, and we certainly understand.
Unless these statistics relate to the Tempe metro area, I don't really care what's happening in Portland or,
Well, I understand, but this is about where the future of traffic and parking is going, in terms of Don can talk 30 seconds, and then we'll be done.
Thank you.
Okay? Thank you. All right.
Dawn Cartier with CivTech, a traffic and transportation firm here locally, and we do a lot of observation of vehicle traffic patterns and parking in the city of Tempe. And we do see a big changing trend, but as much as we sit here and talk about a changing trend of where parking might be in the future, what's important is that we can satisfy the parking now until the trend takes place. We did do some research to try to figure out exactly where those trends were headed, and we researched a study that was done, and it is an older study. So the good news for us is looking at older data is we believe that the parking requirements over time have been have lessened, not greatened. The studies that we are using are from 2010. And they suggest that 0.52 parking spaces per dwelling unit would be a rational number in terms of what we need to provide today. Now, I will say that we're in a really great situation in Tempe, and with streetcar coming through, between streetcar, the Valley Metro bus system, the Orbit system, and Valley Metro Rail, there is no place that is more transit dense with frequency and ridership as the city of Tempe. So Tempe is what I would consider, in my profession and my professional judgment, the most urban of centers in Arizona that we currently have at this particular moment in time. The unique nature of this obviously was just presented, so I'm just here to share that the work that we did is to establish a rate that we feel would be consistent with what you would need today, given the other unique features of this site. I can't say that we would recommend that for every site, but something with car sharing, moped spaces, and the trends that we're seeing moving forward, this seems to be a great location to blend the uses in a way that we haven't seen before and allow some flexibility for the changes that we know are on the forefront with parking reduction, because even though we're projecting a bigger increase in traffic with car sharing in the future, we are projecting a really decreased demand on the parking rates.
Good. Are there
Okay, so we're done. We're happy to answer any questions.
questions of the applicant? Vice Chair Lyon.
All right. So I guess my question is, what drives you to the number you arrived at? I heard, I missed it, there was something about you had a project with 0 parking spaces and 99 something else, and I apologize, I lost it. But why this number? Why not 0?
Well, I think, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, well, I'll let Chet answer that. Let me give you just a little brief history of our conversation with the staff. I mean, we came to this project, there is a decreased parking standard in the CC district. At the same time, we know that parking is going down more. I mean, we weren't trying to, as you know, we're not trying to get into a fight with staff and say we're not going to provide any parking. I mean, in a perfect world, we probably wouldn't provide that much parking. We'd provide 57%. But we were trying to get as close as we could, just in terms of both where we think we could be to what the staff wanted in terms of what the current code is. And the current code is basically 0.5 per bedroom. We are basically at about 0.5 per unit. So that's what drove us to our numbers, trying to get somewhere close to where they need to be. As Don said, and I think Andrew said, we think if we got to a model where we used to be like, let me just tell you how much parking we want, we would have less parking than we're currently providing. Because I think, as you know, the biggest change you've seen probably most is in parking.
Thank you.
Do you want Chad to talk about it? That's it. That's our plan.
Other comments, questions? Commissioner Brown.
Could you outline how the share car is going to work? If you have 5 share cars and I want to go grocery shopping on Saturday morning, will I know that there are 5 there if I get up early? Or do they end up being parked elsewhere?
No, they're in parking spaces.
They're dedicated to this project? They're not like the bikes?
They're dedicated to this project.
They're not like the bikes that are just out there floating through space?
They're not going to be sitting on your sidewalk, just like my sidewalk.
These vehicles will actually be
show you
owned by us,
That's-
dedicated solely to our project.
That's what I wanted.
And
I've never used a
managed
Zip
by
car,
us.
and that's what I wanted to know, how that
So,
works.
yeah,
Zip
so
car.
it's
Yes.
there's maybe a
They
third-party
look like this.
managed system, but the vehicles are dedicated vehicles.
that-
They reside in our building.
That answers that question.
They
Thank you.
go to and from.
And they look like this in the tandem parking spot.
Oh, are they in the tandem spaces?
They will be in some tandem, yes.
If you get small cars, you maybe could even double your.
So there's two kind of
There's 2 kinds.
there's 2 kinds of spaces proposed in the project. There's tandem parking that we do count as part of parking that you see as a use permit, and then there's the shared ones, which is 5-car wide they're proposing, which are not counted because that's not part of what.
It's not part of the code, but that's what we're proposing.
Thank you.
And the ones you see here are kind of the smaller sized options that are available out there. We're also looking at actual smart car, which is the manufacturer's smart, which is a little bit larger car than what you see here as well. You can obviously fit a little less of those in the spaces, but we're kind of evaluating the best combination of those vehicles.
I guess one of my concerns is you're providing 9 what would appear to be, I guess, guest spaces. We have a hotel that's going in next door that has approximately 1 parking space for every 13 guest rooms with no guest parking. What happens when I live in the building and want to have a Christmas party and invite 100 people? They're not all going to come by light rail. Where are guests going to park in your structure?
If you want to invite 100 people to your unit, I mean, they can, honestly, if you're going to invite 100 people to your unit, they can go park in the ASU parking garage in the lot that's adjacent to this building. I mean, that's going to be a we can't build parking for
No, but
one party you're going to have.
but just out of regular, I mean, people have guests to their home. Where are they going to park within this project?
They would park within the public parking system around the building.
So there is no guest parking provided for in the building.
We have a couple of guests.
Yeah, I think we technically, I just don't have the number in front of me, but.
Yeah, we have that. Well, how many guest parking?
But in the case of, a large party like you're referring to, if someone were to choose.
My mother comes for Sunday dinner.
Well,
Where
no,
is she going to
There's
park?
7 on-site parking spaces adjacent to the building, and I think.
And I understand, but those are going to be filled. Those are not going to be, realistically, we all work down here, come down here. We know what parking, I can't get a parking space half the time in the garage, public garage here at 5:30. So
But yes, but
Parking
that's
is
a
an
different
issue.
option during the, I understand, but that is a different option for, like, 5:30, because everybody's working and being down here. When you switch the time and you're having a party at night, there are more spaces open in the parking garage the public parking garage. But I totally take your point, I understand. But I think but that isn't fixed because we provided more parking for residential.
Commissioner Sumner's.
Sure, thank you. Just a follow-up to a question earlier. If I look at this, I see several levels of parking that you'd see from the street. As a pedestrian, you'd look up, you'd see, how many levels of parking up is that? Is that 5 up?
There are technically 4 up. 4 up and 1 in the basement.
Okay. So if you wanted to do more parking spaces, you'd either go down, which is pretty expensive, or if you go up, there's more of that parking that people see at street level, right? Okay, thanks.
Other comments, questions? If not, this is a public hearing. I'll open up to public comment. I do not have any requests to speak. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to speak on this? Seeing none, we'll, I'm sorry. Okay, Philip?
Good evening. My name is Philip Yates, and I'm the president for the Riverside Neighborhood Association. I guess 3 words: parking, parking, parking. I would have to say that to have parking for 2 Mini Coopers it would not really be a very good way to supply parking for visitors, especially if you were going to have a party with 100 people. This kind of a structure with this density is going to cause problems for this specific area, and its height, it's right around the corner from something else that was just approved, and that is essentially the same density as this. And with that being the case, this is not going to be a very adequate kind of structure to be living around and getting into sometimes, especially during games and things going on down in the downtown.
I'm going to ask you to
area.
wrap up. We've got
It's not going to benefit Tempe in any way, I can't see.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to address the commission? Seeing none, then I'll close the public hearing and open it up to discussion among the commissioners. Any comments? I guess, I'm sorry. Do you want to respond to that, Manjula? Yes.
No,
You don't have to respond.
no, I don't think so. I do have one comment that has nothing to do really with that, but just to answer one thing I said. The CC, Rob told me, the CC code does not require guest parking, so that's why we don't have the 100 guest parking. We have the ones on the street.
Now we'll have commissioner comments. Anything? Commissioner Brown? I'm sorry, Commissioner Johnson.
Thank you. I just wanted to kind of give a perspective of someone who might be similar to a resident that would live here, live in this type of building. I live across the street from where this is planned. And to talk the aesthetics of the building, I think it's a very nice appearing building. I recently actually voted in favor of not approving, or I did not vote in favor of approving another project that used an extensive amount of EFS on the exterior. I didn't, that had a very monolithic feature that was all this type of material. This one, I think, and I looked at the material board, and I think it looks a lot better than what I was expecting, and I think it's used a little bit more in an aesthetically pleasing way in this project. So I don't want to contradict myself, but I think in this instance, I think it's a little bit more acceptable, a little bit more, I think it passes a little bit more in my book. As far as parking is concerned, I have visitors come quite often to my place across the street, and it depends on where they're coming from. If they're coming from the suburbs and they're used to driving all the time, then they don't like coming down and trying to find a place to park. If they're more used to an urban environment, then they have good proximity to light rail or another type of public transportation, then they will take that. But I've never had anybody refuse to come down that was planning to visit me because of a parking issue. You will get complaints sometimes, though, and they complain that they have to pay sometimes, and that's just part of living down here. My building does not have guest parking to interject that as well. Typically, I prefer to defer to staff in their conditions of approval. However, in this one, I disagree to some extent. I think that as we discussed in the study session with the next project, there was some leeway provided for that, that baseline of what was required for parking. Staff has recommended approval for a lower quantity of parking. I think since we set this new standard, although it was set recently, this is a new standard, and we should have the flexibility to go above or below that standard as well. I don't think because it's new, we can't have some flexibility on it. And I believe that's all that I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also really like the design of the building, and there's hundreds of people a week are moving into Tempe, so 269 units is a drop in the bucket, and I think that as more people are moving here, their segment of the population that doesn't own a car, this would probably be quite successful. So I too wish the staff would be able to be a little flexible in the parking area. I think the 75% is a little high right now, and especially if it takes 2 years before this place opens up. I think we can get a better parking ratio, and I'd like to see this happen. Thank you.
I don't need to thinking. I'll just speak. I'll echo the comments of the two commissioners who spoke before me. I really like the design, and the thing that impresses me the most about it, I like it both from a distance. I think it's got some visual interest and is very different than some of the other things that we've approved downtown. But mostly I like the pedestrian feel and the interplay at the sidewalk level and the landscaping. I was amused that the trees that were kind of toned out all looked like they were, browns and gold and reds, like we have a fall in Tempe or something. But I understand that being from Chicago, maybe that affected your view of what trees look like here. But I love the planter areas and how it's going to feel at street level. My biggest concern, following what staff said, is parking. And I have no concern, or very little concern, that this is going to impact the neighborhoods or the streets, or that there's going to be just, streams of cars driving in circles looking for a place to park, because they're going to visit somebody who lives in this complex. My concern with parking is that if you're designing it to serve a young professional population, and they really haven't bought into the whole Uber, Zipcar, take the train kind of thing, and all of them work in downtown Phoenix or, somewhere other than downtown Tempe, that really what it forces the project to do is they can't sell, or they don't have that target audience isn't renting because word gets out that it's too tough to deal with the parking. So you're really pushed to doing, to taking more students in than you originally had planned. So that really is where I see it impacting, is it really just doesn't mean that there's going to be a bigger demand for parking at the site. It just means that you're putting more students in it who don't come with cars. But I'll go back to my best experience with this is I have a son who's your target audience, who went to ASU and now lives in San Francisco downtown. And going to visit him and seeing where he lived originally in a unit or in a tower similar to this with very little to no parking there. And he lived with two roommates in a 780 square foot, 2-bedroom apartment with a small kitchen and a small living room that they turned into the 3rd bedroom. And none of them had cars. One was a nursing student, and my son and the other roommate worked in the tech industry down in the financial area. And I asked him, I said, this just baffles me, to see that, you all get along and live there for a year without a car. And he said that, very few people he knew had cars unless they lived outside the city. And it seemed to work there. And we're not San Francisco yet because we don't have that kind of density of employment. But I can see that maybe things are moving that direction. And if we don't try it, we're never going to know. Although it wouldn't probably work for me, I think it's going to work, or I'm hopeful. I support the project. If there was a little added parking, I'd support it more, but I'm going to be voting in favor.
Commissioner Sumners.
Thanks. I'm a strong advocate for following the rules. And yet this group is in place to be able to vary just a bit from the rules when the right project comes along. And I know your project in Phoenix at 36th and Campbell. That was very bold. And it's a fantastic building. And I drive by it and I smile and think of the developer that built it, who I'll miss. That said, I think this is so the architect is the right architect. The developer is the right developer. This is the most urban site, urban square mile in our state. And it's right next to an urban hotel, the first in downtown Tempe in a long time. and right next to a very transit dense, as you say, environment that's about to get more transit dense. Commissioner DiDomenico, I share your experience. I've got a son at another university in the state that shall go unnamed. He moved away last year and does not have a car. And the cost, as someone who partially pays for that, is significant. So yeah, it's a lot of money. And it's been fine. He's done fine without a car, takes Lyft, rideshare, walks, and it's completely fine. The trend that I think you mentioned that is coming is probably going to be here closer than we think. And I'm happy to support the project. And I understand why staff is recommending what they are, but I think in this case, I'd be very supportive of deleting the condition of approval. Thanks.
Anyone else? Vice Chair Lyon.
I share some of the thoughts of fellow commission members. I do think that this is going to become mostly student housing. I think that to be a young professional in the Tempe area means you have to have some more options open to you. There may be 25,000 jobs here now, but how many of those are in your profession and how many of those can you actually get? I really think that you're limiting yourself to the kind of people who, well, mostly who are students. I'll just leave it at that. I think that it is underparked. And I'm not wild about the parking layout because it's difficult when you get into these tandem spaces and how do people actually get in and out of this space with this different parking configuration. I think it's just a little difficult. And I know that we're becoming a more dense city, but we're no Seattle. For my money, I don't put any stock in the ITE article dealing with Seattle. We're not there. Our pedestrian base is mostly the students, and if that's who your market is, that's one thing. But I don't buy it as young professional housing. I'll skip the rest of the chatter. I'm not in favor of approving the PAD, and I have some misgivings about approving the DPR, considering that I think that it's underparked. I'll also add, for what it's worth subjectively, I don't think it's fabulously beautiful. We have a lot of projects come through here that look like the box was designed and then we skinned it with 17 different architectural phrases, and if you ask what the architectural language is, there's not a good clear answer. And this building, every one of those four sides looks like a different building. It's fine, but I wouldn't rave about it. Anyway, that's an aside. So we have several things before us, and I have mixed feelings about a couple of them, but I definitely am not in favor of approving the PAD.
Anyone else? Any further comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Commissioner Summers.
Madam Chair, would you like motion on all three at one time?
Might as well.
It's your prerogative.
All right, motion to approve PL 170363, including PAD, the use permit, and the development plan review.
And you're including staff.
And, sorry, and deleting condition of approval on the, let's see, condition of approval number 1 on the DPR, correct?
No, on the PAD.
On the PAD, thank you.
Is there a second? It's been moved by Commissioner Summers, seconded by Commissioner Brown for the approval of the PAD and use permit with the deletion of the staff requirement regarding parking. All those in favor? And opposed? And that passes 5-2 with Commissioners Vice Chair Lyon and Chair Spears in dissent. All right. Our next case is case number 6, mixed-use development of Apache and Terrace.
Good evening, Chair and Commission. I'm Diana Kaminsky with the City of Tempe Planning Division. This evening, the mixed-use development at Apache and Terrace is located at 1100 East Apache Boulevard. This project, let's see if I can go forward. Let's see. There we go. This project is on the corner of Terrace and the north side of Apache Boulevard. It includes several existing uses that are in operation and a remnant parcel from the transit project when the light rail went in that the city acquired. So it includes a development agreement that is proposed to go to council forward with this project for the development agreement and disposition of that property to be incorporated into the development. The site is zoned CSS, and what they're requesting this evening is a zoning amendment from CSS to MU4, including a planned area development to establish the standards and a development plan review for the site plan, elevations, and landscape plan. The existing CSS density is 20 dwelling units per acre. They are proposing to go to 71 dwelling units per acre in conformance with the general plan density map. This would be an increase in density. They're proposing 327 student housing units with a mix of different bedroom types, heavily on the higher number of units, bedrooms per unit. 55 workforce housing and 9 market rate apartments within the same building.
Diana, can I interrupt you? Can you just explain the difference between the three? The student housing, the workforce housing, and the market rate?
With the site plan or just what they're doing?
You're using terms that,
Okay.
workforce housing in particular, that doesn't have a definition.
So the workforce housing means it has to meet the federal guidelines for a level of income that's eligible for housing that's at market rate that they then subsidize. So they have to qualify through our housing department, and that will be managed separately from the student housing project.
Thank you.
They also have the 9 market rate, which are also in the same building. So presumably you could go from being a student to workforce housing, and then as you get a promotion, you could still live in the same community as you graduate into a regular market rate apartment. They're proposing a 94-foot building height. They have a 63% lot coverage and 19% landscape area. The city is asking for right-of-way on both the Terrace and Apache side to accommodate the future streetcar. So they do have a difference between their net and gross, and they've made accommodations within the landscape and the streetscape to provide a pedestrian amenity area along both street frontages. The proposed site plan has a driveway entrance off of the north end at Terrace, which goes into the residential community and circulates around to the west and down to the parking structure, which does have one level of below-grade parking that's separated for the workforce and market rate apartments. Each of those units have one space. The first floor is guest parking and commercial parking to serve the commercial uses along the street front. And then the above-grade parking above that is all of the student housing parking. So they've segregated those uses, but they've managed them within the one garage. It is wrapped on all sides by the uses and the structure. They also have 9 parking spaces at the east end off of Apache that serve the restaurant or retail space, the lobby, the leasing area to the student housing serves where you might have drop-offs, deliveries, and Uber pickups, so that we're not having issues on the street front with people stopping to be dropped off. We have an actual area that's sheltered with underneath the building and podium parking. The workforce housing is located on the west side over here and the market rate apartments. And then they have a separate building of student housing on the north side and then student housing that wraps here. And the ground floor has retail here and amenity space and the lobby area here, and then a restaurant building here at the corner with parking, or excuse me, with patio space on the street front. The proposed materials include a combination of masonry, metal, ephes, and some cementitious board products in different colors. This is their material schedule, and the sample board is here if you wish to see that. The building's been broken up with a series of wraps, and they've used window treatments and recessed areas within the building and some shade canopies. They didn't add as much shade on the south and west elevations as staff had recommended, but they did do enhancements to it after several rounds with the site plan review process. What you're seeing here is the south-facing Apache Boulevard and then the north face of the same building elevation, which would face the other units to the north. Building 1 on the terrace side, oh, excuse me, you're looking at the west face of the garage on the lower elevation, and the upper one is the one facing terrace. Building 2, which is the building in the back, and this would be a phased project. The first phase would be the garage itself, and that would help with parking during construction for the rest of the phasing. Then they would wrap building 1 and start on building 2, and then building 3 would be the last building. Staff worked with the applicant in trying to provide more elevation modifications on all sides of the building, including window details and changes in materials, and the applicant met all of our requests through the site plan review process. Some perspectives. The landscape plan has a very diverse palette. It includes street trees along terrace that are different than the ones on Apache to create kind of a sense of place as you move through the development. A lot of shade and enhanced landscaping within the development with a lot of different color and texture. They have amenity decks serving the student project. At the ground level, they have a pool area that's surrounded by the courtyard, and then the upper level has, the upper level has another pool area and workout area and studio space up on, this is on top of the parking deck. Staff has not received any calls of inquiry or concern on the project. We are recommending approval of all parts of the entitlement. There are no special conditions, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Commissioner DiDomenico.
Then what, so it's a phased project, so what ensures that the workforce housing is built and built in a timely fashion? In other words, there's not like a 5-year delay before we get to phase 3.
So I'm not involved with the development agreement, but there are performance standards that they are required to meet within that document.
So that's in a development agreement with the city, but it's not something that's conditioned as part of our approval.
No, because it's handled through the development agreement.
Can it also be conditioned as part of our approval? Since we don't have...
Without knowing what's in the development agreement, I would be hesitant to put in a condition that conflicted with what our attorneys are working on in negotiations.
No, and I'm kind of conflicted approving it, not knowing that the part that we want that drives the development isn't a given. It's kind of the problem we have a lot of times when there's a development agreement really driving what we're voting on. I think I've mentioned that before.
Chairman Spears, Commissioner DiDomenico. The request will have we did an RFP out for this property site. The adjacent property owner with the developer was the winning bid on the request. And some of the obligations that will be outlined in the RFP as a result of the RFP is that we'll provide assurances in that development agreement that the workforce housing be completed in a specific time frame. So those obligations will be brought forward to City Council, and then City Council will act on those requests. And so we've been in negotiations with the developer, City Council, and they'll identify those parameters to make sure assurances that happens.
Maybe when the developer comes up, they can just give us, give me some sort of an idea of what they think is a reasonable time frame that they're willing to be bound by, and maybe leave it at that. Then I appreciate it.
Certainly.
Other questions of staff? Commissioner Morosi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Earlier, I had asked staff about the possibility of a right turn lane coming out of Terrace, because it's a one-way street with the light rail there, and Orange and Terrace and Lemon and Terrace, they're all getting denser. I was worried about the traffic backing up to their driveway or past their driveway. What did you find out about that?
I did talk to traffic engineering about this. The challenge that they had is that we're already taking right-of-way on both street frontages for the streetcar. So they did not feel that it was necessary, it wasn't warranted by this project in the traffic study that was done to justify having a right turn lane on Terrace.
Could the city put like sensors there in case it does happen that would trigger the light to move the cars out?
We do have the ability to alter the signaling at the intersection itself, but you're probably getting beyond my level of expertise in traffic engineering.
Okay, let's see how it goes. Thanks.
Commissioner Brown.
Ms. Kaminsky, you mentioned, or someone mentioned, a remnant of publicly owned land that was then part of this project. Could you, and then when you talked about workforce housing, I somehow had the impression that's the land in particular. Is that correct?
No.
Could you describe what happens there?
Yep, let me go back to the site plan. So the remnant parcel is this portion here. And I can show you maybe on the aerial. It's the vacant lot on the corner. There are existing uses here and here that incorporate the whole site. So the workforce housing is, we're kind of doing a land swap where this corner, my understanding is council wanted something to activate that corner. So we have the restaurant at the corner and the uses that you see on the site plan, and then the workforce housing is on the west side.
Okay, but was the public land agreement the carrot that got them to build the workforce housing?
That was part of the
That's part of
request
the
for
deal?
proposal, that if they went forward with the project, they would need to provide workforce housing. It didn't specify where on the site, other than they wanted activation of that corner.
I understand. Thank you.
Other questions? If not, if the applicant would like to address the commission?
Madam Chair, members of the commission, my name is Nick Wood. I'm with the law firm of Snell and Wilmer. My address is 1 Arizona Center, and I represent Gilbane. A little bit about Gilbane. Gilbane is one of the oldest development companies in the country. They were established in 1873. They're 140 years old this year. They do business in 12 countries, and they have 50 offices. With respect to workforce housing, Madam Chair, Commissioner DiDomenico, we're happy to have a stipulation that says we'll commence construction of Building 3, which is the building that will contain the workforce housing, within 6 months of the issuance of the first building permit on the site. So we're happy to do that. Again, we've been negotiating with the city on the development agreement. We've agreed on all the terms. It'll be going to council the same night that this matter will go to council. However, we're happy to include a stipulation if it's your pleasure. Madam Chair, Commissioner Amorosi, with respect to the right turn lane, I just talked to Dawn Cartier, who's our traffic engineer in this one as well, as she was on the previous one. We're in an interesting location because we're at a place where both the streetcar and light rail meet. And as a result, we have to make a dedication of almost an acre of land along both streets, along both Terrace as well as along Apache. As a result, they're going to reconfigure those lanes and reconfigure the through lanes as part of the streetcar improvements. I'm told, and I'll have Dawn come up here to make sure I'm not saying something stupid, but I think what she said is they have the ability to create that turn pocket that you just asked for. But again, we don't know that yet because they haven't done all the engineering on the site. If I can figure out how to work this. There we go. As we usually do when we start a new project, we visit with staff, we visit with neighborhood leadership, we visit with the mayor and council. And a couple of council members asked us if we would consider doing workforce housing. And of course, my client being one of the oldest companies in the country, they took that very seriously, and they said it would probably work. Initially, what they had under, let's see here if I can do it, there you go. So these 3 parcels they had under contract a year ago, essentially when we started this. When we went in and talked to the city said, look, we own this parcel. It's an interesting parcel because it has a strange geometry. It's located at this corner, which of course is not a 90-degree corner, it's a 45-degree corner. And any individual development that is a standalone development will have some real development challenges. Obviously, because you have light rail here, you're going to have streetcar over here, you've got the intersection here with the lights. How do you enter and exit the site? How do you have circulation, all these things. But they said the important thing is we would really like you to consider doing workforce housing. So my client went back, to the drawing board, and they said, okay, we think that makes sense. Now, I'm a Tempe resident as well. I live in South Tempe, and I'm thrilled about this. I think it's something that is truly needed. So I was very happy that they were willing to do that. Of course, when they agreed to do that, they adopted and accepted a whole bunch of additional challenges. As I said, we've got light rail going here and here. This frontage now becomes double the frontage. It actually now goes around the block and it goes up Terrace. So we have all those frontage issues. Another issue, of course, is this geometry of this corner. When you're designing buildings, it's nice having nice 90-degree corners on the property and the lot that you're working with. When you start putting 45 degrees in there, it creates some challenges. And of course, we have Todd and Associates, who are just excellent architects, as you've seen, and they were able to work with the client and work out the programming and everything on the site. Additionally, because we're extending this frontage on this road, architecture now had to change dramatically. We had to create, architecture and design that breaks up the building, separates the building. Now we created separate buildings, as you saw on the site plan. We have 3 separate buildings. All of the articulation and things on the surfaces, the pop-outs, all of these, for example, the pop-outs are 14 feet deep. We have all of the landscaping that we have to do along these frontages, which is very significant. So we ended up with this as the site plan. And as you see along both Apache as well as Terrace, we have significant landscape additions. Staff let us know that obviously the biggest concern for them, and obviously what should be for my client, is shade, particularly along this long expanse here and this expanse there. So we've done enhanced sidewalks. We have landscaping on both sides of the sidewalk. We have 12 different tree species that will go in here. So we have landscape here on this side of the sidewalk, then landscape between the curb and the sidewalk that goes around the corner against all the enhanced development there. We have, this corner was a challenge. What do you put right here at the intersection of both light rail and the streetcar on that kind of a geometry? So the idea was to create a restaurant. In fact, Commissioner Amorosi, it was a suggestion, it was a great idea. But if you're going to have a restaurant, right, you're going to have some outdoor dining, but the outdoor dining needs to be shaded. So we actually have the building extending over, this outdoor eating area. So it's covered all of the time. Nothing of it is really out underneath the shade. As far as changing the articulation and the street frontage, this is a cutout. This piece right here is a cutout. This is a water feature. It's an area that the residents can go outside and sit, etc. There's lots of shade and other things, but it's an enhancement. We have, we had to work on traffic circulation other than what we otherwise would have had. So we have 3 curb cuts along Apache Boulevard. Apache Boulevard. One is right here, which comes into this covered, below cover area. Lyft and Uber can come in here. There's a big enough turnaround area for them. Again, it gets them off the street because we can't necessarily have them parking on either side. Here we have the main entranceway in and out of the parking structure, which is 7 levels above ground and 1 below. And we have, this is again all covered, but it's very well landscaped. Here is another entrance in and out of the site. Now we have gates here, so we don't have cut-through traffic. Those gates are for emergency purposes only, but this is another entrance into and out of the parking garage. And then here again, this is an access way in and out, that with a gate here and a gate here. So we made this thing work based upon the challenges that were created by buying this parcel. And but it not only works from the standpoint of the land plan and the architecture and everything else, but it brings a very needed and added element to Tempe, and that is 55 workforce housing units. And of course, the workforce housing process, we have a development agreement. It's monitored by the city. There's no way that it won't be for workforce housing based upon the structure. We're satisfied with all the stipulations. As I mentioned, Madam Chair, we're happy to add a stipulation that within 6 months of issuance of the first building permit, we'll commence construction of building number 3, which is the workforce housing building. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Oh, one other thing, I apologize. One question that was asked, one question that was asked of us was convertibility. Can we convert these units to more conventional units? Commissioner Amorosi has been very helpful with, we did the RISE project, if you recall, those of you who were on the commission. We also did the district. And one of the questions that's always being posed to us is what happens if student housing goes away? What if it has to be converted to market rate? Well, one of the things that we had Todd and Associates do, as you can see here as an example, is design this so that, for example, if this is going to be converted, this element right here, which is bedroom, 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 can be converted to a living room, bedroom, kitchen, etc. So basically, we create 2 separate units from what would be a 4-bedroom unit. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for the applicant?
Thank you.
Mr. DiDomenico.
Mr. Webb, just one real quick question. The workforce housing building, 55 workforce units, 9 regularly priced units. Are the 9 units physically different than the 55 units, or is it just a pricing thing?
Madam Chair, Commissioner DiDomenico, it's just the pricing. Okay. The floor plans are identical.
So the floor plans are the same. The 9 regular priced units don't have marble tubs instead of fiberglass or
same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Brown.
Mr. Wood, I'm not sure if you're the ideal person to ask, or if your architect's in the house, but
architect is here. I'm happy to call
can one of you discuss the quality of this housing? I mean, the workforce housing is great. I think we all appreciate that. We don't mind where it is on the site. But is there anything? How can you tell us that it's not going to be just the bottom of the barrel in terms of quality and livability? What kind of units are these going to be?
James Lovato with Todd & Associates. Good evening. These are technically the 9 market rate. The units, the workforce housing are going to be no different. Same finishes. I think as Nick kind of established, Gilbane doesn't want to have something on their record or a history that is not top quality. So their direction to us was there's really no cutting of any corners. The design, the floor plans are identical to the market rate units themselves. Obviously, the additional units will help the project, be affordable for them to continue to provide the quality that they're striving for.
Can you define quality a little bit? Look, what kind of finishes are we going to see in the kitchen? What kind of appliances will?
As far as the details, I mean, the appliances are probably going to be the stainless steel, I would imagine, look, not cheapened in any way. Probably quartz or granite. We haven't really dove into specifically either one of those, but it's not intended to be, lower grade plastic laminate, something like of that nature.
Thank you.
So the affordable units will be integrated with the market rate so that
correct.
Someone walking in the building is going to say, oh, this is subsidized.
And they'll share all the same amenities. There's a club room and a leasing area. Everything is mixed. There's a single fitness space internal to the building, mail center, elevator, and so on. I don't think there'll be any designation differently between any of the units that will separate or differentiate at all. That's not intended at all.
Yeah, I think that one of the comments that was made earlier that caused me to ask that was the idea that, you start off in student housing, maybe get your first job, move to workforce, and then you get a promotion and you can afford to go to, the standard or market pricing. And it.
You can afford to pay more rent.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, congratulations, we're raising your rent, but you stay in the same unit. Because there's really, it's not like you move across the hall and it's a better unit. It's just a
Well,
pricing point.
You get the privilege
That's
of paying
correct,
more.
in that building.
Within
So-
that, right.
So the student housing units or the other two buildings, the units are different.
Yeah.
They are not the same as Building 3, as the workforce housing unit.
Other questions or comments? Thank you. This is a public hearing. Is there anyone in the audience wishing to address this case?
Madam Chair, I believe there's one card.
And I did have Philip Yates. Did you met the other case as well? Okay, thank you. Seeing no one in the audience, I will close the public hearing and I guess open it up to commissioner comments. If there's anything. Commissioner Amorosi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank the developer for including workforce housing and that it isn't different visibly from the market rate housing. I'm glad to see that and some other suggestions that were incorporated into this instead of just totally student housing. So I'm happy to support this project.
Other comments? Vice Chair Lyon.
I think it's a solid project, so I'll be supporting it.
Commissioner DiDomenico.
I'm familiar with the developer and Gilbane's reputation. And Mr. Wood, I appreciate you coming forward and saying that you'd be willing to add that stipulation. It's sufficient in my mind just to know that that's the intention of the developer to move that quickly on phase 3 and that third building. And so long as the city's aware that that's their intention, they can incorporate that in the development agreement, and I don't feel a need to do that here.
Summers.
Thanks. Just kudos to the city and to the developer for the patience to wait a year to get this right, wrap the other parcel in, and meet one of the city's long-term goals. So thanks.
Other comments? Again, and I would also like to thank the developer and the city for finally starting to tackle the issue of workforce housing. So, with that, I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval of PL 180025, which includes the zoning map amendment, planned area development, and DPR with the conditions of approval as outlined in our packet.
For a second?
Second.
It's been moved by Commissioner DiDomenico and seconded by Vice Chair Lyon. All those in favor? Opposed? And that passes 6-1 with Commissioner Brown in the dissent. We will now move back to item number 3. And I would like to remind everyone what we asked for or approved the postponement of this to allow the owner of the property to come and address some of the issues that were raised. I understand there's a lot of public neighborhood sentiment about this, but our issue tonight is to approve or not approve a design. The issues that are of concern to the neighborhood are really enforcement issues and political issues, which is what the City Council exists to deal with. If you spoke on this in the past, your testimony is part of the public record, so I would ask that you not repeat yourself. Again, the main purpose of this meeting is to allow the owner of the property to address issues that were raised at the last meeting. So with that, Mr. Kingsley.
Good evening, Commission. Albina Kingsley, Planner to the City of Tempe. As you recall, this case was previously heard on February 27th, 2018, and was continued to today. To give you a little refresher, Roosevelt Court Townhomes is located approximately 1,840 feet north of University Drive and is between 5th Street and 1st Street, about mid-block. The site had a PAD overlay approved by City Council in 2016, which established development standards for the site. And subsequently in 2008,
the Development Review Commission approved new 10 townhomes for the site. Further townhomes were constructed by February 2012, but the remaining 6 were never built and the building permits expired. The PAD is still in effect since the 4 townhomes were originally built. The applicant is requesting a development plan review consisting of a site plan, building elevations, and a landscape plan to add the 6 new single-family attached dwelling units to the 4 existing on site. The applicant is proposing the same design as existing units. And with that, staff is recommending approval subject to conditions. I also want to make note that on March 28th, staff met with the applicant and property owner to discuss some of the residents' concerns and how he can address those. The owner seemed pretty amenable to strengthening the CC&Rs for the site. Also, the leasing agreements to deter renters from having some of the parties and things and concerns that the residents brought up, which have led to disruptive behaviors on the site. They are focusing on or looking into hiring a property management company for the entire site as well, and also increasing the height of the east wall to 8 feet. It's currently short, about under 7 feet, about 6 feet 8 inches or so. Also, for the record, since completion of my staff report, staff has received 3 phone calls and 10 emails, all of which are in opposition of this request tonight. I also have spoken with about 3 of the members actually in person about some concerns they had with the project, and they also provided me some documents in which I forwarded to you previous to the meeting. And with that, I can answer any questions you may have of staff.
Questions of staff at this time? Seeing none, we'll call the applicant up.
Yeah, my name is Chan Sahota, and I'm the owner of Roosevelt Court. I came to Tempe in 1978 to work at Garrett Corporation, and I bought some old apartments at 510 West University Drive from a Canadian investor with the hope that I will build something and live there. I always kept my residency in Tempe since 1978. University Drive hardly had any new buildings at that time. In 1985 and 1986, after a long effort, I was able to build 2 front buildings containing 16 units with pool, a masonry fence around the lot, and paved parking and landscape. Today, there are 60 condo units with 82 parking spaces under the name Hermosa Place. At that time, Hermosa Place, Scene 1, and Hayden Square on 5th Street were the only new buildings around, and city officials were trying to revitalize University Drive and downtown, and University of Phoenix started right across our building. I lived in Hermosa Place for about 20 years myself, and there are many ASU students living there. There are many owners, but most units are still rented. Maybe 25% owner-related occupancy. I have never seen any big gathering up there because there is no open area for people to gather. Police calls are very rare. I'm still HOA president, and the condo complex is doing fine. As I speak, a company is putting new layer of asphalt at the cost of $35,000 to make it look nice, just like University Road. I bought this subject property at 323 South Roosevelt Street in 2003, with 4 to 6 wooden units. By January 2012, I was able to put 4 townhouses. All the site requirements such as utilities, landscape, retention, and parking area. Now I have these complaints which my neighbors have made. First complaint is not enough parking, reduce the number of units. According to R3 category, Roosevelt Court's size could accommodate up to 11 units. I have 10 units and 28 parking spaces. So we have provided number of parking spaces required by the city for R3 development. At Hermosa Place, we have 40 units, 2 and 3 bedroom units with 82 parking spaces. And it works okay even after 32 years. There are no parking allowed on University Drive, so we don't have no, side road to park. Now, number 2 complaint, owner is not selling these family units. These neighbors who are complaining about my ownership themselves own rental houses. Todd Green, who is not a complainer, but he owns 8-9 rental houses in this neighborhood. There is no law which prohibits me from owning these townhouses. Even the president of USA owns many houses in many states. Mark McIntyre, he's a real estate broker. He naturally likes to sell any real estate, including my houses. Complaint number 3, east side wall is not 8 foot high. This wall is on Mr. Wang's property. If he agrees and the foundation holds, we could add another 2 blocks, and I will pay for it. Complaint number 4 and 5. This is fraternity parties and associated problems. First point I want to make is that when all new 6 buildings are completed, there will be no open area left for any kind of party. That point was made by the architect too. At Hermosa Place, many times more students live. We still don't see any party throughout the year. There was one big party at this place in June 17, last year. At this property, one tenant lady from house number 236 told me that the neighboring house, that these party people got okay from the neighbors, except Mr. Lindbergh. It should not be portrayed as everyday situation. It should be noticed that Mr. Lindbergh, who is the closest neighbor on the same side of the road, did not make any bad remarks about that party. He did ask me once to tell my tenants not to throw around empty cups. I will have a management company and apply more rigid rules. There will be no fraternity activity on this side with or without the consent of neighbors. And also, we shall insist on the people under the threat of towing the cars to force them to park inside the garage and keep their garbage containers also inside the garage. However, owner or management company cannot deny accommodation to anyone because he or she is an ASU student. It's against the law. And I have no contact with any fraternity. This is the first time I heard about fraternity problem. Complaint 4 and 5 is continued, and that was the most offensive one. Jair's lives across the street. I don't know where Calvert lives. Their claims are totally false. Here are their claims. Cars are coming at 90, 80 miles an hour. Parties with a lot of people, public urination, public sex, underage drinking, drunk driving, fire bombs, crashing of cars. Police don't do anything. Tenants living there are decent people, and they are not criminal. Police can't arrest innocent people. Tenants living at Roosevelt Court are very friendly, well behaved. I would not hesitate to give them good reference to anyone of living there. I seldom see them outside in the open area. I don't see them parking on Roosevelt Street. I walk to this property quite often to check or clean the yard. These complaints have no merit but to tarnish the character of ASU students. To me, that's appalling. How car is traveling at 80 miles an hour because their house is right in front of our entrance, how can it enter at 90 degrees? There will be a lot of crashes. I never seen no crash. These are made up stories. Jair's house, like I said, is right across our entrance. My house is on southeast side, bordering this development, separated by 8-foot wall. And my house, essentially is next to Lindbergh's house. I don't hear all these disturbances as these two neighbors are claiming. My hearing and eyesight may not be as good as a 20-year-old, but I still have an Arizona driving license. Because I found this is extremely offensive, the comments is, and that's why I hired a surveillance company to give me the look at these points, what they are claiming. And their surveillance, I hope you all have the copy of. And now here is what I saw in those reports, daily reports. They say, seen no public drinking, no noise, no speeding down the streets, all is quiet, no disturbance or fraternity activity on the property. Cars are parked in the driveway. Now, that is bad, but like I say, we are going to correct it. On March 23rd, saw one big truck waiting to pick up a guy from neighboring house next to the townhouses. On March 23rd and 24th, heavy curb side parking due to the Tempe Art Festival. People walking to Mill Avenue. But there was normal in and out activity at this subject property. So this surveillance report, again, it shows that commentary by Yates and Calvert had no real basis and is totally false. They are making up false stories. Yates called the police with similar made-up stories. Tenants living at Roosevelt Court tell me that they never see him going to work. He lives well with a big truck with big tires. So it seems that Yates and Lindbergh and even Darcy have a negative view of any new housing development. I saw them complaining against a triplex development on April 3 right here, and that triplex is about 60 foot away from my development. They successfully derailed the request from the architect to have 33-foot height, building height. I would say it's a bad news for the city and this area if the city is going to be guided by naysayers only. I removed 24 old houses and apartments. I replaced them with new ones in Tempe. That's not bad because I came as an immigrant. There are a lot of people who would like to see new buildings, but they don't come to attend these meetings. The only people you see is all these naysayers, the people who want to oppose. ASU students, in my experience, they attribute greatly to downtown Tempe housing market. Real estate prices will fall and vacancy rate will increase dramatically if ASU were to provide accommodation to all its students. Now, new buildings attract economically better off people, and that's good for the city. And also the city and county also collect more in taxes. Every time new building goes up, prices of nearby land goes up too. In that sense, these neighbors who are opposing will benefit economically without any investment from these new buildings at Roosevelt Court. Maybe surrounding neighbors will take cash by selling their land to the developers and go to neighborhoods where they are more suitable. That will be good all around. Yeah. That's all I have to say. Yeah.
Mr. Soto, could I ask you a question? Have you considered processing this application as a multifamily housing rental unit as opposed to the townhouses?
They are townhouses.
Because it sounds like that you're planning on having them be rental properties and not owner occupied. Did I hear you incorrectly?
Well, now when I build, I borrow money, and very likely I have to, sell them. But I also say, like I saw at Hermosa Place, most of the people who are buying them, they buy for their.
I understand that, but I'm asking your intent.
Yeah. Well, like I say, I'm going to borrow money, and I'm not I'm 77-year-old, so I don't want any loan sitting on my head. So very likely I have to sell them.
Other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Amorosi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I got your report that you hired a private security company for 1 week. It was smart of you to do it after the St. Patrick's Day holiday. I noticed that, but your response was that the neighbors' complaints were totally false. And I have a
Commissioner
police
Amorosi, can I
report.
remind you, we're voting on design issues,
But he gave us this report and said that
but
their
it's not really,
claims are false.
it's not really,
I'd like you to do, the city has a program called Crime-Free Single-Family Rental Program. That way, the police would contact you directly if there were any calls to your units, and then you would see. If you don't get any calls from the police, then you know that you have a crime-free area. But if you do, then you know that the neighbors aren't lying.
Well, the point I was making is I live next door. I go at least a couple of times, and all the time I see is exactly the, you see the picture of the building, you hardly see any human being. I mean, they are always inside, and these people are claiming that filthy stuff. I mean, it's hard to believe that they can go that far. They maybe, they don't like me, but honestly, those people are very, very nice. They never say one bad word to anybody. Why the heck they should be disliking them so much? It's hard for me to understand.
thank you. Other questions of the applicant? Thank you. We will open it up for public hearing. Again, I would ask that if you have previously spoken, we have your comments on record. And again, I will remind you, this is a design review case. It's not an enforcement case. I understand what your issues are. We all understand that you're not happy with the current tenants in the building. There really isn't anything we can do about that. So if you will please limit your comments to the design of the building and not what's happened or hasn't happened in the past, I would appreciate that. We are limiting time to 2 minutes tonight, again, because what we're looking for are the design issues. So if after we have the public comments and you'd like to respond, we'll allow you that opportunity. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is read a comment into the record that from Eduardo and Ronald Yates. This was originally approved as single-family attached dwelling units with and it was not planned to be what it has become, a fraternity house, which has caused many problems for neighbors. If not returned to its original use, should not be approved. The next individual, Justine Yates.
Good evening, Madam Chair and DRC. I'm going to speak fast since I only have 2 minutes. I would first like to say that none of us neighbors like the fact that we have to be here tonight. None of us are regular public speakers. We're all neighbors, long-term residents. Even more so, which brings us here, is the fact that we have to live next to this development. I listened to the DRC members' comments last meeting and heard over and over again that this is not the responsibility of the DRC to make moral or political decisions. Well, 8 years ago, you granted the height and density variance for this terrible project, and now now they want to expand, and we have to live with this. This complex has been a nightmare. I'm a mother, a active community member. In so many ways from the beginning, it's just been a disaster. If I were you, I would not be able to sleep at night knowing that I was granting permission for this to expand. I speak for families, my neighbors, and the community. Never once has anybody parked in their garages, Chan makes promises that he does not keep. He's planning on, he had said that he was going to build an 8-foot wall and never
Wrap it
did
up,
so.
please.
Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck Lindberg?
I'm Chuck Lindberg. I live next to the development at 331 South Roosevelt. Over the years I've lived in the neighborhood, I've worked with 10-year plans to try to enhance the neighborhood for both my neighbors and also to understand how the system works and try to enhance both the neighborhood and the plans that we develop for the city. The PAD was granted with the goals that mostly the city had in mind, which was increased density, and they gave economic enhancements to the developer and also put down stipulations that were under that PAD. I thought it was interesting that he brought up Hermosa Place because Hermosa Place was a precursor of the same things that have happened here because that development wasn't finished and similar problems happened at Hermosa Place that we've seen at the place next to me. I thought it's appropriate that Mr. Zuckerberg testified today in front of Congress because here was a system that was set up with defined goals and aspirations and didn't anticipate people abusing the system to their own ends. And like President Reagan said,
need to wrap it up.
Trust but verify.
Thank you. Merrill Darcy.
Hey, Madam Chair, I am a commissioner. I own 2 properties on Brown Street. I'm close to this area, less than 300 feet. I'm concerned about my properties going down in value simply because of the amount of rentals that DRC is approving to this. We are ground zero for this type of development in our area right now. Is that there's no standards for this PAD. There's no standards, there's no HOA, there's no on-site management company. There's basically no CC&Rs. It's like the only thing that we have is the DRC and the city council and planning for comprehensive requirements that we need. But anyway, if anything, I would like to invalidate the R1, which is 12 years old, and go back to R3, or I would insist on a stringent use permit that you can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Edward Wong.
Okay, I'd like to read my statement. I stated from previous meeting at the commission that my name is Ed Wong. I live at 324 South Wilson Street. I have been a neighbor at 47 years. I'm strongly opposed to this project at 323 South Roosevelt Street. Since there are numerous other issues that have molded my train of thought, these issues will be brought forth by my fellow good neighbors who have endured the same problems I have over the number of years. As stated previously, my main concern is my existing west wall, which he mentioned as his east wall. Through the past disagreement, I placed my foundation and my 6-foot wall on my side of the property line, as illustrated by my pictures that you can see my concerns about the wall. Starting from the reference point of the southwest corner, then going north along the wall to my neighbor's perpendicular 8-foot wall. Now, in the best interest of all parties, before he does anything, the owner and developer needs to build his own 8-foot wall on his side of the property line as a sound screen as dictated by the first phase of the project many years ago. My concerns are that the DRC and the building inspector must make the owner and the developer build his 8-foot wall out of 8 by 8 by 16-inch concrete blocks.
Okay, you need to speed this up.
Not fence blocks. In addition, the foundation must be structurally sound to accommodate the weight. My fear is that this wall might fall into my wall if not properly supervised.
Okay, thank you. Kelly Calvert.
Do the committee members have,
you have this document, 4 pages, all right, then I won't worry about projecting it. I'm Kelly Calvert. I live immediately north of this project. The first point that I want to make is that I have the city council meeting notes where this project was approved. September 2006, Roosevelt Court was approved with conditions. If you turn the page to the second page, there are 2 conditions. Number 3, a building permit should be obtained in substantial construction on or before September 7th, 2008. And the subdivision plat should be recorded prior to the issuance of permits, et cetera, for September 7th, 2007. Oh, by the way, on point number 3, it's if not done in time, the zoning shall revert to that in place at the time of application. Condition number 5 says failure to record the plan within 1 year shall make the plan null and void. I did a document search. I found that that was not done. Those conditions were not met. I asked for Mr. Kingsby assistance, and he did the same thing. On the next page, he shows that construction commenced September 2010.
Thank
2
you.
years later. Furthermore, they're 2 years after the deadline. Furthermore, I got the Maricopa County aerial photography, the one dated 6/2010.
You need to wrap up. We've got your comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Two more comments. On
Very
the wall,
quickly.
he did not build a wall along my property either, and I believe that he's obligated to do that, even though I have a wall. That's currently being done in a project on the north side of me. And the final comment I'd like to make is when I did this record search, I found several pending loud party citations against the property that Mr. Sahota is responsible for, and he's not taking care of those. It also contradicts his comments that this hasn't happened. And I think if he's here requesting services from the city, he should pay his fines first.
Thank you. Can staff address the issues regarding the dates that were in the PAD? The dates that were part of the PAD, as my understanding is the PAD is still valid.
So, Madam Chair, Commission members, back in the era before 2014, when the PAD reform was ordinance was adopted by City Council, the requirements was you came with a conceptual plan and a zoning case, and then you had up to 2 years to process the DPR. The PAD was approved with a recommendation from Commission and approval by City Council. The DPR then came, the design came later and got approved by DRC. There always has been this condition about the expiration of the PAD, but the state law, the way it's written, it says that it's not an automatic reversion, but we have talked to you about all the other reversion cases we have taken forward. It's not an automatic reversion unless the city has something and laid out a process for it, which was done in 2014. So that's when the PAD, so 2 things, not only just that amendment to the ordinance that now addresses how a PAD can be reverted or the zoning can be reverted, but also, if you remember in 2000s, so we also, when reversion cases are looked at, right now when you see a waiver of rights and remedies, that was a result of Prop 207 that did not get, that got passed by the Maricopa County residents or the state, I think, in November ballot of 2006. So pre that ballot, if we don't have a Prop 207 waiver that says that the property owner signed off on it, so those are some of the properties that we do not look for reversion either. So there's those 2 instances. So when the first list was developed by our department and Ryan was involved in it, when we listed the projects that would qualify for a PAD or a zoning reversion was the ones that are post Proposition 207 and with a waiver of rights and remedies that was signed off.
Commissioner DiDomenico.
So to summarize and clarify, the original case that was approved by the City Council that had dates certain for reversion really doesn't work that way, and they still carry the power of that original approval.
And back in those days, before the PAD reform ordinance was adopted, staff, basically the city worked in good faith. As long as there's a building permit application and it's under permit plan review, it's going through a plan review, you know, those things happened. So if there was some application in process, it was done in good faith. It's now that we have an ordinance in place, so we do comply with that ordinance now in terms of, you know, notifying the property owners if their PAD has expired and going through a pretty stringent notification process before we even can go into a reversion hearing. Council has to authorize it first, even before we can go into a hearing of that sort.
Does everybody understand that? Okay. Thank you. The next public comment is Karen Gitless.
Karen Gitless, I'm speaking for the Maple Ash Neighborhood Association. The entitlements go back to 2006 and 2008. The PAD created allows more entitlements, greater height, for example, than was given by the underlying zoning. I think that the whole PAD process needs to be revisited so that we could at least allow a meeting to happen so neighbors can find out about a project that starts up again 10 years on. The second point I have is that we could not have a better experiment here, or the city could not have a better experiment than to see what happens when you put X number of students living in one or two each into a room in X number of bedrooms, most of them with their own car and none of them with adequate supervision or matured frontal lobes, which this doesn't happen until age 25, more often in males than women. We know now what can happen given several years of documented infractions and multiple meetings of neighbors with Tempe Police, ASU Police, Code Enforcement, and others, and also the staff reports. Okay, I'm not going to list the complaints. We've all heard those. What is very egregious, though, is that we are confining ourselves, or you are confining us to what we can say, speak to, and the design elements of this. A lot of these aspects have to do with design. Parking, there isn't enough parking, and that's part of design. Other elements. I'm not finished, and I would just like to say I am offended by the amount of time you are giving speakers and your attempt to limit
I
what
appreciate
speakers are
that.
saying.
We are just rehashing the same
Thank
public
you.
comments that we've had before. That's why we're doing this. Philip Yates, you're last.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, name is Philip Yates, president for the Riverside Neighborhood Association. I'm not going to repeat myself from last time. All I will have to say really is that the structure, the design of this particular kind of townhouse has proven itself to be very inviting to the students that have been renting. And there is no reason to believe that that is not going to be the case if we approve another 6 units. Getting in and out of this has been dangerous. I mean, had there been any kind of a fire truck could not even go through to get into the back of another 6 units. The parking is going to be a nightmare. There's going to be 10 garbage cans out in front of these townhouses 4 days a week, and it will be very, very unappealing to the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who did not fill out a card that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Would the applicant like to add, is there any additional information you'd like to add? There's no reason just to rehash again what you've said. Yeah.
Regarding that east side wall, we can put a additional wall if the Mr. Wong doesn't want me to add to his wall. And I like to make a point about that empty space. It's a big nuisance. Once these new buildings are in, like that's why I brought up that Hermosa Place. Once you don't have no space to gather, these parties don't happen. And if you leave, if you don't build, you will find again people want to gather in the empty space, you know, they have area. So like, I'm willing to bet if you talk to the police, you wouldn't find even one complaint about Hermosa Place, and they are 4 times bigger. You know, there are 40 units, and you wouldn't even have one police call. Well, that's what I said before.
Thank you. Vice Chair Lyon.
I'm sorry, sir. I'd like to ask you a quick question or two, if I may. So are you okay with a stipulation that says you will build an 8-foot block wall on the east side of your property? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, we will build another wall by his wall.
Okay. Are you okay with the condition to build a similar wall on the north side of your property?
I don't know about, well, it's going to be masonry wall, you know, which is consistent with our walls. I don't, you know, his wall is the same kind of wall what we have. It's just shorter. So it's going to be block wall consistent with the color what we have.
At what height? At what height would that wall on the north be? How tall is the wall on the north?
What tall is going to be 8 foot.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a question for staff. Mr. Kingsby, that's the requirement already that's in the existing DPR was an 8-foot wall on both of those boundaries, correct? North and east?
That's correct. I think what we need to verify is the ownership of the north wall, because I believe Mr. Calvert said that is his wall. So we need to verify who the ownership of that wall is. And if it is not on Chan's property, then he can place a wall there if he likes.
Yeah, and then we could condition that, that if it's his wall already, he adds to it, and if it's not, then he builds a new wall
The
on
north
his
one
land.
is already 8 foot. It's the east one that's not. But that's why Obina is saying that we need to confirm whose wall that is, and if we have to, then that means there's another wall that needs to go up against it.
Okay, Commissioner Brown?
I think everybody knows, or maybe you don't know, walls that are 6 feet and less are not engineered, and the city of Tempe will permit that without engineering review. I'm just pointing out the obvious. You can't just add 3 courses to a 6-foot block wall. I have seen 2 of them blow over in the last 40 years. They need to be engineered, and there's various tricks to it. So just be careful that we don't all assume we can throw 2 more feet of block on the wall, which is a trivial technical issue. I thought I'd better throw that out.
I have another question for staff. Have you ever had has this body ever added a condition of approval requiring third-party professional management of a multifamily rental project?
Not to my knowledge, because the challenge is how do you enforce that, because it's on private property. That's why the portion that we do have control over is that condition that you see on the about forming up with very specific items, we say, in the CCNR that they need to address. And the CCNR, we as staff would first review it, and our attorney's office reviews for form, but we do review it so we can ensure that all the things that we are talking about can be addressed or are being addressed in the CCNR. And then that CCNR is recorded and all the other things that has to happen. But with something like that, that's our challenge.
Other comments? I'm having a real issue because it does not sound like, to me, this is going to be a townhouse project. It sounds like it's going to be a rental project, and there are different development standards for multifamily rental versus multifamily owner-occupied. Does anyone else see that as a problem?
I feel exactly the same way, and some of those development standards deal with the operation of the property.
Correct.
And the interaction of the tenants within the project, as well as how it interacts with the neighborhood around it. This clearly was never intended to be a townhouse project. It's multifamily rental.
Commissioner Amorosi.
I just would like to agree with both Commissioner DiDomenico and yourself on this. Thank you.
Any other comments? Commissioner Brown.
I visited this property 3 times since our last meeting, once on bike and 2 by car, and found it to be extremely tight. The parking was open, so I assume it's okay to pull in. It's sort of semi-public. The 8'6" turnarounds with square corners are really difficult to maneuver, even with a economy car. So I just think that in many ways the design is deficient. I'm not sure how a firefighter would reach the back units if they're built as they appear to be designed. But that's a technical question that I think would be part of the permit process. I hope it is. I guess my conclusion is that in many ways the design is deficient.
Commissioner Summers.
Just a question of staff. I see there's a diagram here on page 5 of our report that looks at fire lane striping, and I mean, from a practical standpoint, is that sufficient? Does that meet the city's requirements for vehicle turnaround and fire truck apparatus?
Yes, it does. We did run it, this new application too, we did run it by our site plan review process. Just as a matter of semantics, maybe, but from a development standards, these are built to for sale units, because for sale townhome units have to have a firewall rating. They are considered single family, so the parking does meet the code that is required of single family. Unfortunately, you know, what you're saying about the intent, which is a concern that we have heard from the residents as well as the commission and council, that's something that as long as it meets the code, there's not any control that from a planning and zoning side that we can do. But for a fire, the width of the driveway and for access, emergency access, it does meet the requirement that the city currently has, the fire department. What we did ask Mr. Sahota to address was not letting anybody park where the actual little driveway area, if you want to say, just outside of the garage, because the cars were intended to be parked in the garage and not outside, as you can see from some of the aerial pictures and things like that. So, and it does provide guest parking, even though we, you know, single family is, that's not, they're meeting the guest parking requirements too.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Well, we need to vote on something, so I'm going to put something out there. I'm going to move for approval of PL 170253 with the conditions of approval as listed in our packets.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion is by Commissioner DiDomenico for approval of PL 170223, second by Vice Chair Lyon. All those in favor?
Yes, Commissioner.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Chair Spears. I just wanted to bring it to the attention that there was going to be a condition, I believe, added about the wall on the east property line to make that equal.
Didn't add that.
You didn't add it? Okay.
No.
All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And those opposed? And that motion fails 6-1 with Vice Chair Lyon in the dissent. I will now entertain another motion.
Madam Chair, I move for denial of PL 170253.
Second.
Been moved by Commissioner DiDomenico and seconded by Commissioner Amorosi. All those in favor of denial? And those opposed? And that passes 6-1 with Vice Chair Lyon in the dissent. The next item on our agenda is commission member announcements. Does anybody have anything? I will apologize for my hacking and coughing. I have allergies. I apologize for that. Staff announcements?
Madam Chair, for April 24th, we do have one agenda item that I previously mentioned in the study session. Ambika will be here to present the urban core, the current, what the current status is, and get some early feedback on the things that you would like to see as part of that project. And then for the regular agenda, we had two, and then the applicant requested one to be postponed for a later time. So we do have just one request for a use permit standard and a development plan review for the restaurant PDQ Tempe at 1639 West Warner Road.
Thank you. And with that, we're adjourned.